Lorraine Formby calls herself one of the casualties of war, families caught up in the ongoing feud between outlaw motorcycle gangs. A year ago, her son was shot as he worked in a tattoo parlour in Sydney's West. Police are still investigating his murder. But this week's events have served as a bitter reminder. 6 shootings in a series of attacks and counter-attacks on houses and tattoo parlours. This afternoon, Premier Barry O'Farrell took further action in the fight against the feuds, announcing tough new laws aimed at banning bikies from owning tattoo parlours, which he described as dens of iniquity. Tracy Bowden reports.
Welcome to the ABC Election Centre on a night like no other in living memory. A night where we already know beyond any doubt.
It was election night last year. As New South Wales voters awaited the results, shots rang out in this tattoo parlour in Sydney's western suburbs. Another salvo in the ongoing war.
Danny and the other tattooist was working on a client, and the people who shot Danny came in the back door. The men came in with balaclavas and the hoodies, and they pointed the gun at him because they were working on a client, and they pointed the gun at him, and Danny screamed no and stood up, and they shot Danny here, and the bullet went through the arm into the chest and into his stomach. And when the ambulance came, there was a lady ambulance attendant, and they couldn't pick him up because he wasn't little. And they couldn't pick him up to put him in the ambulance, so he put himself in. He didn't live long after that.
The business was owned by members of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Lorraine Formby's son, Daniel Vella, worked there as a tattooist.
I really think that it was a mistake to shoot Danny. I think they were really there to frighten the owners, because that's what they are. They're standover merchants. They stand over each other. You do something against my club, I come in and I do something against your club, and that's common practice. It's all retribution. I think they were there to force some issue. Yes.
For Lorraine Formby, this week's news of shootings, gang wars, outlaw motorcycle clubs and tattoo parlours has brought the memories and the pain flooding back. She says her 40-year-old son was not a hardened criminal.
Danny was not a bike member. I'm not saying he was a perfect person. I mean, he got into his own fair share of fights and arguments over different things, but he was not a criminal in any sense like that.
Good evening. We begin with an unfolding story in Sydney's West.
1 year on and nothing has changed on the streets of Sydney.
This most recent spate of shooting we think is probably related to a conflict within the outlaw motorcycle gang world.
The attack started with shots fired in Pemmel Way in Sydney's West. The intended target, a member of the Nomads Motorcycle Club.
It is almost certainly always pre-planned and very specific. It's not random in the sense of finding a house to shoot up. It's usually aimed at a particular person that someone has a grievance with.
In the early hours of Tuesday morning came the payback. 4 separate shootings directed at the Nomads' rivals, the Hells Angels. The first target was this home in Granville. It's owned by the family of Mahmoud Dib, once a Bandido but now a member of the Hells Angels. Then, over the next 3 to 4 hours, shots were fired at tattoo parlours in Baulkham Hills and Marylands. Then, the Marylands home of another family connected to the Hells Angels. This morning, in what appears to be direct retaliation, the home of a former Nomads boss was one of 2 houses sprayed with bullets.
There's drug supplies, there's firearms supplies, there's all sorts of other criminal activity they get involved in. And if another group is involved, is taking their share of the cake, according to them, then they will do what they can to eliminate the other group's ability to take that share. Sometimes it's just through conversation and agreement. Other times it's through violence. Sometimes it's just through a fight. Other times it's people get murdered. That's the very nature of organised crime.
The response from police and politicians has been swift. In a joint news conference, they announced a new anti-gun task force, Strike Force Kanara, to investigate the shootings, and were keen to stress their progress so far this year.
52 shooting incidents since January this year, 40 offenders been arrested in relation to firearm offences. Of those 40, 20 have been directly charged with shooting incidents. But of note, 15 have been charged with hinder investigations and concealed serious offence. And some of those 15 are actual victims.
Police say a key challenge is what they call a wall of silence from people who have information. Deputy Commissioner Nick Caldas went on Arabic radio to appeal for help.
If they do supply information, we have an obligation, and we take it very seriously, to look after their identity, to look after them personally, and to make sure that nobody knows that they have cooperated with the police, if that's what they wish.
Police always know what's going on. It's transferring that intelligence into evidence that is the difficulty. And I think we have to be reasonable. Why would you expect any family to sign up with the police to give evidence against another member of the same family, or a member of an opposing family or business, that is going to cause you so much grief if you do that? It just makes good common sense that people are going to be very reluctant to publicly give evidence against people who have the potential to cause them a lifetime of misery.
What we're announcing today is a package of measures aimed at outlaw motorcycle gangs.
This afternoon, authorities took direct aim at the murky world of tattoo parlours, with Premier Barry O'Farrell announcing new laws to control what he calls dens of iniquity.
They involve changing the law to ensure that there is, for the first time in New South Wales, a regulatory system about who can operate a tattoo parlour, and that will ensure that the Police Commissioner gets the final say on who is able to operate tattoo parlours. Secondly, it's about amending the Criminal Organisations Act to make tattoo parlours a prescribed organisation, which means that, like casinos, like the tow truck industry, like the security industry, members of outlaw motorcycle gang can't work in those occupations.
It will be welcome news to Daniel Vella's mother, but for her son, the changes come too late.
Danny very much wanted to have his own business, but because of the bikers, they have a rule that if you don't work for us it doesn't matter whether they're nomads or Hells Angels or whatever, you have to work for an affiliated group. Otherwise you will be shot or burnt out. You cannot work from home, you cannot have a private shop of your own. Danny on many occasions got together with some other tattooists, and they did try to do just that, but the threats, even the people who were going to rent them a premises, were stood over by the group like Bandidos and that, to stop them renting that shop to do that.
What we're determined to do is put in place a regime that regulates those who own, those who work within tattoo parlours, and a principal part of that regulation will be to give the Police Commissioner the say as to whether or not those people are deemed fit, deemed in the public interest to operate those establishments.
It's just over a year since Daniel Vella's death. No one has yet been charged with his murder.
And we have a garden outside. My husband made him a garden because Danny loved roses, and he put him in the garden. Danny's home with Mum, and he's happy here. He's safe, and nobody else can hurt him or tell lies and cheat and frighten them.